Never in human history have we had an asset with absolute scarcity. I always wondered, like, why is this person buying a fourth home for $10 million? I'm like, they can't live in all these homes. I was just scratching my head, like, what is going on here? And then I realized that now, of course, that's like store of value. They're putting their money somewhere because the money's a melting ice cube. What does real estate happen to grow per year? Oh, magically around 7%. Very interesting. Okay.
Welcome to the Bitcoin RX podcast. This is your host, Nurse Ralph. Today, I got with me Mr. Lee, who's going to help me give you your weekly dose of orange pills so you don't die from fiat disease. Lee, man, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Yeah, Nurse Ralph, good to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you being here, man. Before we start talking about Bitcoin, of course, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey before Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I've been a technologist in information technology for next year would mark 30 years, believe it or not. Just various corporate IT type roles for small companies, big companies, etc. But about so it's about almost 10 years ago, I did my master's in business, my MBA, at a university in town, and they called me back later, a few years after, to come in and start up a class on emerging technologies in business for undergrad students as an adjunct professor part time. So I thought, oh, that'd be kind of a neat way to give back. And it's a little bit of money, but it's mostly just to kind of, give back to the students and things like that. And so among those emerging technologies, there was, blockchain and AI and quantum computing and 3D printing and all these different things. So I had to, of course, they say that if you want to learn, teach. That's really the best way to learn. I wasn't necessarily an expert in all those things, but as a technologist, I certainly was familiar with all those topics, except for blockchain. And so once I got in, I started doing a little bit of research, and I started learning a little bit about Bitcoin, and then immediately got distracted by Web3 and the metaverse and all this other nonsense, and kind of got distracted for a couple of years. But the end of 2023, I started to have some interest again, and I was on a plane ride, flying out to New England for work, and saw I was like, yeah, that Bitcoin thing. The last time I looked, I think it was dead. Right? It's like 15K. It's probably never coming back, and it was 20,000, I think, at the time. I won't get the number exactly right, but I was like, that's interesting. And while I'm on the plane in the short flight, it's up like $5,000 or $6,000 just in the span of like an hour, and I'm like, what is this thing? I need to dig into this, and so I started kind of going down the rabbit hole. Not the easy way. I wish I had done the easy way, read the Bitcoin Standard or something, but I ended up listening to the Sailor series with Breedlove for 20 hours and was just really enamored with the technology, the power of it. And I'm like, okay, this really is something. I started learning about the ETFs that were coming. So this was end of 23. The ETFs were going to launch in early 24, but that was not consensus. Like, a lot of people didn't believe that was going to happen. I developed some conviction that it would. So I started rotating out of my altcoins that I had at the time. I started taking some cash capital, fiat capital that I had, and immediately started kind of buying a large chunk of Bitcoin. Um, and then the ETFs did happen, and that just furthered my conviction. So kind of went down the rabbit hole from there.
Yeah, interesting. And so you said, before we go back into Bitcoin, you said you work in tech, IT, and all that. Couple of questions for you about tech, since you seem to be an expert in it. So a lot of people think that AI and all that, they're gonna take our jobs, and it's the end of the world and all that. But others think that we can use AI to make our lives better and make our lives easier. Um, what's your opinion about all this?
Yeah, like many things, there's extremes, and I think you're right. The extreme is either the doomer view, AI is taking over everything. There's this guy on X that has been posting these, I think, chilling, terrifying AI generated videos of like humans merged with technology, but they're very creepy. It's very terrifying, and I'm like, okay, so there's this doomer view, and the other view is like, oh, it's utopia. It's like, I heard on a podcast the other day, oh, we're gonna go to 3 and 4 day work weeks, and of course that's been predicted for decades and decades, and then of course it's never happened. Companies just get more out of you, right? And so neither of those extremes, I think, are accurate. What I always told my students when I was teaching was, AI is not going to replace your job. It's somebody that is experienced with using AI that's going to take your job. So maybe as a startup founder, maybe I don't need a team of 10 developers to start up a new business to try to become a unicorn. Maybe I only need two. Maybe I need two really good engineers that are really good at various AI tools and can do the work of four or five engineers. Um, I'm in the media space. Maybe I was just listening to some podcasts from Marty Bent on TFTC, and he said that yeah, instead of having to maybe hire an additional person, he's just using AI as part of his day to day workflows. Um, that's helping to further things that he could have maybe not either not have done or would have needed to hire more staff to do. So I think that's what's really going to happen. Is it's going to kind of there's this idea in Silicon Valley of a 10x engineer. So I think you're going to have like 10x employees if they're really skilled with AI, and they'll do very very well. And then the staff that don't adopt AI will fall behind.
Yep. Yes. Yes. And very, very interesting. Yeah, because I remember there is a hospital in China. I mean, I doubt. I don't know if you've seen that, but a hospital in China that started using robot nurses ish. I was like, oh shoot, is it true? Oh my god, my job. So that kind of like freaked me out for a little bit. But then again, I was like, you know what? You can't really replace like compassion and patient care. You know, robot can pass meds, a robot can do certain things, but like at the end of the day, like there is some about like patient care, or maybe not just in nursing, but like in other industries as well that humans are still gonna be needed for. So yeah, you're right though. It's like it's one of those things that you can. I think it's gonna help. Personally, I think it's gonna help. Improve our life. So yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
yeah,
maybe the robot, goes and gets the warm blankets from the machine and kind of has them near where the patients are that keep requesting them, right? And then you grab them and you can actually put it on the a person's body. But the AI driven robot can assist you in that way. Is there ever a world where it completely replaces you? Like I guess I don't see that happening in the near term. I think over the next 10 years, we're really just going to see you are going to see more robots, you are going to see more AI. But one of the big pushes from AI ethicists right now is human in the loop. So we don't want to have a total situation where the AI is completely autonomous, because they can make mistakes, they can have hallucinations. There's a lot of risk. What if you create a robot nurse, right? Optimus, the robot nurse, and it makes a mistake. Well, whose fault is that? Who who gets the lawsuit, right? Who gets the subpoena? You're not going to subpoena the robot. So you probably still want that human in the loop to kind of say, "Hey, I need you to go work these six or eight, complex tasks. Go retrieve all these things. Go retrieve these medicines, and then I will administer them to the patient." I mean, that's a model I could see, right?
yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. And back to Bitcoin. I wanted to ask you what makes Bitcoin so special? Like, if you let's say you were like in front of like let's say 100 nurses and you had to give a quick 5-minute presentation just to tell them like, hey, like maybe not why they should buy Bitcoin, but why they should at least look into Bitcoin. What would you tell them?
Mhm. The first thing I tell people is, Bitcoin's truly unique as an asset, right? Never in human history have we had an asset with absolute scarcity. Like I think people I almost want to say that again, right? That we've never in human history had an asset with absolute scarcity. So the idea that we have this like perfectly engineered money in Bitcoin with it can never be more than 21 million units, having it being divisible. So I don't have to buy a whole one. I can buy a fraction of one down to 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. The fact that today, it's Juneteenth, of course, an incredible day in our history of liberty and freedom for Blacks in America. But our banks are closed. I can't transact. But you know what? I can go buy some Bitcoin, and maybe I will right after this call. I can hop on River and buy my Bitcoin. So it's disintermediated. There's nobody in between me and the asset. I can buy it anytime I want. I can trade it anytime I want. A gentleman, I should have it down here. I don't have it in my office yet, but there's a guy on X that was making these really cool. I don't know if you've seen that the sculpture of the Satoshi, disappearing Satoshi figure. And so he made one with, yeah, he made a 3D printed version. And so I messaged him on X and he said, "Yep, here it is. And here's my Bitcoin address." Boom. I just sent him some sats. And boom, I just got my sculpture yesterday. So I didn't have to go through a bank. I didn't have to go through Visa, Mastercard, and take 3% fees. Um, so yeah, it's just when you think about it, like it's the scarcity, it's the fact that nobody's in between me and anyone I want to transact with. If you and I want to transact, we can do that. And the most powerful thing about it is, similar to gold, I have a place where I can store my energy. Like when I talk to people about, again, so what's why would I care about Bitcoin? Why should it even be interesting? Well, what is money? Like that's the very first question. When I mentioned earlier, right, the Sailor series with Robert Breedlove that I listened to that came out back in 2020. I listened to it in 23. The name of his podcast was "What Is Money?" Robert Breedlove's podcast, and I hopped in. I don't know, episode whatever it was, 100 and something or whatever it was. And back in those days, he would say, hey, if you're just new to Bitcoin, new to my show, go back to episode one. Because why I was just looking for like, what is money? Like I'm learning about Bitcoin, but like why is this thing burst onto this? Why did it burst onto the scene in 2008, 2009? What happened here? And so you learn about money, you learn, oh, my money, they say it like loses, 2% purchasing power. That's the goal of the central bank, right? The US central bank, the Federal Reserve is to they would say, inflation at 2%, but it's really losing your purchasing power 2% a year. You dig into the reality and you're like, well, wait a minute. Actually, the debasement rate's a lot higher. Like, what is inflation? It's not just the price of goods, it's how many dollars are out there chasing those goods. And so the debasement rate's closer to 7 to 10% since 1971. It's about 7% a year. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then you see Bitcoin that's growing 50, 60% CAGR over the last, 5, 6, 10 years. And you're like, oh, well, that's a place I can actually store my energy. I can transfer it without a third party. All those other benefits I've already talked about. When you stack all those things together, it's like, yeah, this is the kind of asset I want to store my energy in. When I go work hard, every 2 weeks I get my paycheck, I DCA some of that right into Bitcoin. Like boom, locked away, let that sucker grow. And if anything ever happens in the financial system or banking, like in 2008, well, I don't have to worry about a bank run. There is no bank runs in Bitcoin, right? I have my Sats in cold storage, and if I need them, I can get them. So, but there's just a lot of benefits that make Bitcoin just a perfect money, a pristine asset that really beats other things like gold, which of course are too heavy and difficult to store and not digital, right? I can't send $1 billion of value to Japan in an hour, right? Like I can with Bitcoin. So, not
Yeah.
that I have $1 billion, but if I did, Bitcoin would be the preferred asset, not
Yeah.
more.
You know that phrase where they talk about um, how Jeff Booth said that if Bitcoin, Jeff Booth, there's many people have said that if
Mm,
Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, it will also fail as it will just fail. What do you think about that one? Is it because in my head I'm thinking I don't see it failing as a medium of exchange because I feel like naturally as this thing grows, I feel like people are just gonna want to just spend it. I mean, it's like it's money at the end of the day. What do you think about that statement?
mm. It's interesting. I've been noodling on this because I've heard Jeff Booth say that, and I have a lot of respect for him, and really enjoyed reading his book last year. Kind of a quick aside. I mean, as I started getting down the rabbit hole, I mean, I didn't stop with those podcasts, right? Some of the books behind me I dove into, the Bitcoin Standard, Proof, Price of Tomorrow, Creature from Jekyll Island, try to understand about the central banking regime, etc. So yeah, utmost respect for him and his work and the podcast that he's been on and things. But no, I don't. I mean, so yeah, two things. One, I don't know that that's a failure of Bitcoin per se, right? Bitcoin, it's got 100% uptime. Every 10 minutes, another block gets produced. All of that is going to continue. I mean, every day, every year, every decade that Bitcoin continues to operate, just continues to strengthen the asset, strengthen the protocol as additional participants are coming in to work with to support the protocol and engage with the protocol and buy Bitcoin and mine and different things, run nodes and so on, that the protocol strengthens. So the protocol is getting stronger, not weaker, right? As the protocol is getting stronger, not weaker, why would it fail? Like right now, the one of the strongest cases for Bitcoin is store of value, right? One of the strongest cases for it right now is, as Saylor would call it, digital capital. The idea that I can recapitalize my family balance sheet with Bitcoin versus just relying on income. Now corporations are starting to make that same realization of, oh, wait a minute, instead of relying on, price to earnings multiples and forward expectations of revenues and earnings and so on, and then decapitalizing my business by doing stock buybacks and different things like that. Let me put the hardest asset in the world on my balance sheet and strengthen my company for the long run, for 100 years, 1,000 years, etc. So starting with MicroStrategy or now Strategy, and then now we've got dozens of Bitcoin treasury companies that are discovering the same thing. You have nation states that are discovering it, like Bhutan, that's been mining Bitcoin for several years now, growing their balance sheet, and that's afforded them to be able to invest in their economy and invest in their citizens. So people are realizing like it's a powerful asset to have on your balance sheet. So the medium of exchange piece, is that a failure if we don't like transact and buy coffee and different things like that? Like, I don't think so. Having said that, there is incentive to transact in Bitcoin. And it is happening today. It's happening in circular economies like, El Zante, right? Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador. It's happening in small ways with, a person like me buying things from individuals in Bitcoin and transacting. Certainly it happened at the Bitcoin conference. I think we broke a Guinness Book of World Records in terms of the number of Bitcoin transactions conducted in one place. So I went to the Bitcoin conference in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and certainly I also transacted as I bought from vendors. I bought some books. I paid for them in Bitcoin. There was this Panties for Bitcoin business that goes to all the conferences, and they sell underwear for men and women, and so yeah, I bought it. I bought because last year I saw her in her and her family in where was it, Nashville, and I paid in fiat, and I remember this disappointing look came over her face,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, and I thought to myself over the year in between, I thought, okay, wait a minute. Her and her family make this really high quality product. Like these are not Hanes underwear; they're like really high quality Italian underwear, right? Italian handcrafted, crafted underwear, right? And Bitcoin is like the best asset, the best kind of money that you could imagine. So why wouldn't I transact in Bitcoin? Why wouldn't I take her really well crafted product that I know is going to last? It's not going to be like, a cheap thing that's going to have holes in it in a few days. Why don't I also compensate her in the best money possible? Like it's a real expression of of respect and in some cases love, I would say, to use Bitcoin to pay someone versus like, here, let me pay you in this thing that loses value 7% a year. Like, what does that message send?
Yeah,
Versus
when
like,
you say it like that.
yeah, like here, I'm going to give you this Bitcoin
Yeah.
for this well crafted product you made that's going to grow in value 50 to 60% a year, right? So there's a big message there. So yeah, so on the one hand, I don't see that if we don't immediately or in the near term get to Bitcoin being kind of a widely used medium of exchange, and maybe I'm putting words in some people's mouths by saying widely used, but if there's an expectation of in the near term, Bitcoin's used widely as a medium of exchange, and that doesn't happen in the next 5-10 years, I don't think that's a failure, but I think it's inevitable
Yeah.
in some regards.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's, yeah, fair point. And you mentioned MicroStrategy and all the nation states buying Bitcoin and all that. And I believe you are wearing a strategy B shirts, correct?
I am. I
Yeah,
yes.
nice. Yeah. Okay. So what's your opinion about what Sailor is doing and all the new companies? Because I know some people are. I mean, I'm a strategy shareholder as well, and some people are like, he's taking Bitcoin away from people, and but at the same time, it's like others, they like it because he's making Bitcoin scarcer and is creating a business out of the most scarce asset in the world, and like you said, he's protecting his company from the fiat, the, the I guess fiat death. So what's your opinion about what strategy is doing and like all the different products that they're putting into the market, the yield, all of that?
Yeah, so maybe for your listeners, I don't know how much you've covered it, but yeah. So Michael Saylor, he founded MicroStrategy, what as MicroStrategy in the '90s, I guess it was, and did really well during the dot com boom, right, and then kind of stagnated really for 20 years. not able to, they basically make like business intelligence software, right? So they make different analytics and dashboards and kind of help businesses interpret their data. And he's going up against the behemoths of Silicon Valley, the Microsofts of the world, the Oracles of the world, etc. So he stayed as one of the largest independent, basically the largest independent uh, AI and analytics company, but just never could grow. The business just stayed as, a billion, 500 million to $1 billion business. And so he discovered Bitcoin through the lockdowns of 2020, and basically just was saying, "Hey, what am I? I've got this $500 million of cash, melting away on my balance sheet. I'm watching Wall Street, do very, very well coming out of the pandemic, and Main Street just getting kind of crushed. And anybody who's holding fiat, treasury bills and so on, are also getting crushed. And so he's like, what are we going to do? And he discovers Bitcoin and starts to, put it on the balance sheet, and then starts to use the capital markets, initially through convertible bonds, issuing stock, et cetera, to just start accumulating Bitcoin. And if you were to ask him, I'm sure he'd probably say, like, they didn't have the strategy they're doing today in 2025 is probably not what they envisioned in 2020. It's definitely something that they've grown into. They've learned kind of as they've watched the capital markets, react to their acquisition, and they've watched the stock really rip, and premium to their net assets really rip. They've kind of responded to that. So they just kept leaning into it because it was working, and the goal really quickly became, hey, we're gonna buy Bitcoin. That's what MicroStrategy is going to do, and they changed their name to Strategy now, and added the Bitcoin logo to kind of highlight their focus on that. The AI business is the analytics business is still there, but it's dwarfed by their Bitcoin holdings. Nearly 600,000 Bitcoin they have now, and worth over $60 billion. So that's kind of the backdrop. And if you think about it, it's a very rational thing to do. You own this business. You can't grow from a revenue and an earnings perspective. You've done as much as that you can with the business in terms of growing it, and your employees are leaving. They're like, oh, I can go work at Microsoft or Oracle or what have you, and get more money in stock because his stock was dead at the time. Well, now the last 5 years, their stock's been doing very, very well. So now they can start to attract employees. They can start to attract interest in the capital markets. Obviously, he's gotten a lot of media attention. I mean, everything improved. Like, it's like your shirt says, "Fix the money, fix the world." Like, you fix the money on your balance sheet, you put a pristine capital on your balance sheet, like Bitcoin, and everything gets better. So it's a rational thing to do. So I think is it, whether it's even a net positive or a net negative to the protocol, and I believe it's a net positive. It's a rational thing to do. It's what would happen anyway. I think some of the Bitcoiners that I see, and I definitely consider myself a Bitcoin maxi, that get a little wrapped around the axle with the Bitcoin treasury companies. It's like, but what else would they use? I mean, do you expect them to go buy gold? Yeah, are they going to go buy 10-year treasuries? Like, what would you expect them to do? Um, and I get it, right? It's 1% of the world maybe understands Bitcoin. 1% of Bitcoiners maybe understand treasury companies. So it's a little dicey, but yeah, it's a very rational thing to do as a head of a business. And now that people have had a chance to see strategy be successful for, in August it'll be 5 years. Other companies are finally jumping in. The first 4 years was interesting. Everybody kind of expected, hey, when's the next MicroStrategy at the time? They just rebranded a few months ago. When is the next strategy going to come along? And for several years, it just wasn't happening. Right, 2022 depths of the bear market. Everybody's like, see, Sailor's going to get liquidated. They're going to get they're going to get margin called and all this ridiculous nonsense. That none of that was really true. They did have a loan that was encumbered some of their Bitcoin, but they ended up, paying that off and moving to unencumbered debt instruments. So, and it didn't happen until last year. Then Semler Scientific, announced a similar strategy, and then Metaplanet in Japan announced a similar strategy. And then again, it was kind of quiet for a while, right? And then this year, it's been an explosion. Now as Bitcoin has really done very well since the ETFs launched. Now you had the red sweep in the U.S. elections at the end of last year with a very Bitcoin and crypto friendly administration coming in with the Trump administration. So now everybody kind of knows, like, hey, wait a minute, all those regulatory headwinds are cleared out. Let's talk to the board. Let's start moving forward. And now all of a sudden, we have dozens of companies coming forward, and I do believe it's positive for the as people are adding their energy, their capital into the Bitcoin protocol. It strengthens protocol, right? It adds more fuel to the fire. So it's a net positive, but more than anything, what I want your viewers to really take away is it's a rational thing. What else would you do? If you as an individual would want to have pristine capital on your personal balance sheet, right, for your family and possibly for your future generations. Well, if you were a corporation, why wouldn't you want the same thing? If you were a rational government, Nayib Bukele has certainly taken he's been the vanguard of sovereign adoption in El Salvador. He wanted a pristine balance sheet for his country. Why wouldn't you want that? So that's what I see, is it's inevitable. You're going to see more corporate adoption. You're going to see more sovereign adoption because it's inevitable. It's the best asset you could possibly have. Why wouldn't you want it?
Yeah, that's very. I mean, you're right though. It's like, yeah, what else would you do? Like that's yeah, that's a fair point. Uh, and as far as, I mean, I try to stick to one thing, because yeah, stick to MicroStrategy. I don't go into every other company that has Bitcoin on them. Although I was very tempted to, because I saw how great my portfolio did with strategy. So like, how do you see this next bear market coming in for them? For I mean, for everybody, because strategy survived the 2022 bear market and all that, but like a lot of people are worried about, oh my god, like when Bitcoin drops, and I don't think Bitcoin is gonna take a 80% drop anymore. That's just my opinion. I don't know, but hey, who knows? You never know, because there's so many you know new companies, countries, everybody's buying it. Maybe I don't know, maybe 30, 50% dip. I don't know, but that, to me, that's nothing anymore. Like I'm immune to it. Like from being in Bitcoin since 2019, I never really understood Bitcoin until like late 2023
Mhm.
ish. So like from like being in it and seeing the volatility, now I'm like, oh, it's just another day into Bitcoin. But like, how do you think these companies are gonna like, I guess like, yeah, is that like a factor to take in? Do you think they're gonna have to, like, I know strategy held their entire Bitcoin. Do you think that's gonna affect them a lot?
Yeah, there's quite a bit there, right?
Hmm.
So first, this notion, I guess, of what does a Bitcoin bear market look like? I think that's maybe the first thing, is like, what's the assumption there? And honestly, it's funny. Depending on the day, I vacillate. So some days I feel like, yeah, the cycle is going to continue. We're probably just going to have another a steep drop. Again, I don't agree it's going to be 80% either. But if you follow like the 4-year cycle theory, then we would expect that to happen. Some kind of blow off top this fall, and then a bear market in 2026. But the other consideration is when gold had its ETF launch, in the first ETF launch about 20 years ago. It entered a multi-year, I believe 8 years of a bull market, of just continuing to go up before it finally kind of peaked and consolidated and rolled over. So could that happen with Bitcoin? Could we have kind of an extended cycle here? And that's entirely possible. There's a chart floating around on X that kind of shows the parabolic blow off tops of the last couple of last three cycles, let's say, and then this cycle, this like nice stair step, activity that's been doing through this whole cycle. And does that just continue? Do we just stair step our way, to a million in the next 4 or 5 years? And that's possible. So, but no matter what, things always happen in cycles. You always have. I see that liquidity is a really big factor behind both Bitcoin and gold and risk assets in general. Unfortunately, the world still thinks Bitcoin's a risk asset, even though it's the most risk off asset you could have. Only we Bitcoiners understand that, but not everybody understands that. And some of the big pools of capital see it as risk on. And so if there's a war in the middle of the night, as there happens to be right now, right, a lot of saber rattling happening between Iran and Israel, Ukraine and Russia, and we certainly pray for peace to prevail among all these belligerents. But anyway, so I do believe that as liquidity does, ebb and flow and dries up, we're definitely going to see a pullback in Bitcoin as well, until there's eventually going to be a point, S curve adoption, stock to FOMO, whatever you want to call it. There will eventually be a realization that it's risk off. But until then, I do expect a drop. Now, with the treasury companies, what could we see happen? So with strategy, you have a good example. They manage their debt very, very well, right? And they move to from just straight. I think they got an initial kind of like a straight loan that was collateralized by their Bitcoin. They stopped doing that. They said, nope, we'll do convertible bonds instead. So now you, with a convertible bond, basically you get money, and they were getting them at 0% interest, by the way, to go smash buy Bitcoin. So they don't have to pay any coupon to the lender, and they're able to, once the stock reaches a certain level, they're able to actually convert that debt into shares of stock. So it's somewhat dilutive to the common shareholder, but because they used Bitcoin, the proceeds to purchase Bitcoin, it's accretive for shareholders. So we love it, and the lenders love it as well, because of course they get the upside in the stock. So they moved to vehicles that really didn't encumber the Bitcoin at all. So they were at pretty low risk. So people don't realize, like, there's really no, the value of Bitcoin have to drop into the teens for their stack of Bitcoin to be basically worth less than the debt that they have, and they'd have to sell Bitcoin to extinguish the debt. So that's not really, liquidation is not really a risk for them. So they structure themselves very conservatively. They also are very cautious on their debt ratio. So they've even talked about our debt to assets. We want to keep that 20, 25, 30%, something like that, right? So they're not crazy over levered. That's kind of the sense you hear in the news, the CNBC, et cetera, is that they're crazy leverage, levered up to their eyeballs. Like, no, they're actually, right now, they're under levered. I would say. I think they're, maybe I can look it up while we're chatting. Um, but they are, yeah, their debt to NAV right now, debt plus their preferred instruments, is 19%. I mean, so they're very unlevered. So they've chosen a pretty conservative approach, and so I'm pretty confident that they would not financial advice, of course, but they would survive another bear market just as they did the last one. The other companies that are coming in, we'll see. Do they take that same conservative approach? Are they using similar instruments? When I look at like a MetaPlanet, for example, in Japan, which, disclaimer that I'm invested in MetaPlanet as well. They're even less levered than that, right? They're really using this what they call moving strike warrants, or basically the ability to issue shares of stock at the market. They don't have a similar ATM facility as we have in the U.S., but they're able to, through a partner in Japan, they're able to basically issue new shares of stock, and so they have almost no debt right now. They basically extinguish the debt whenever they take it on. So a drawdown in Bitcoin really wouldn't impact them. It might impact the equity, but it doesn't take the business under. Now, where we get into interesting situations, now you're going to have additional companies coming in that are doing unique things. Like, some companies are talking about acquiring businesses that are maybe kind of maybe trading at below book value or things like that. So distressed kind of businesses, buying them using their public. Being publicly traded, to then use that to tap the equity markets, issue shares of stock, issue debt, and other fixed income securities to buy Bitcoin. How does that work out? Well, I don't know. I mean, what if those businesses have other problems with them? What if they have other risks tied to them? Saylor talks a lot about, when you buy a company in equity, he has a slide with all these different risks of regulatory, and what if the mayor in your town says, oh, you can't have a rental property here anymore, and so all of a sudden your business is completely shut down, and things like that, right? And so there's definitely more, as you go out the risk curve, you have some more opportunities for the business to potentially fail when Bitcoin starts to really pull back. So we'll see how those work. I'm sure we're going to see some failures as we go into the next downturn of some people that went too far out on the risk curve. But the interesting, the line I'm seeing on X these days, on Twitter, is the treasury companies are going to cause the next bear market. Like, they're comparing them to FTX, to Celsius, to BlockFi, to all those entities that Alameda Research, all the SBF nonsense that was happening. Those are fraud, in some cases, fraudulent activities, right? With SBF and his crew, and generally, I'm not seeing that with these treasury companies. I think where that sentiment is coming from, is maybe a lack of understanding on the fiat side, how TradFi works, how the capital markets work, how debt markets work, how equity markets work. And if you don't understand those things, and Bitcoiners tend to have a distrust of TradFi and Wall Street and banks, and so the sense is just, it's going to blow up, and it's like, well, some of them might, but if you haven't dug into it, you probably don't know. And And a lot of these companies are very transparent, not all of them, but I would say like Strategy, you can go to strategy.com, you can look up their stuff, right? Metaplanet, same thing. They've got a portal, you can see all of their, in fact, even Metaplanet goes the next step further. They actually publish their reserves. You can actually see the Bitcoin they have through their mempool.space instance. So a lot of these companies are pretty transparent what they're doing. If they're in the U.S., they're regulated, so they have to always issue, an 8K, for example. Strategy will always issue an 8K statement from an SEC filing, basically. You can see all the stuff that they did. So it's very, very different than the last cycle where everything was opaque and these companies are running in, offshore, right, Cayman Islands or Bahamas or wherever they were located. This is a very different ballgame. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, and I don't know. I'm not really like, I don't know much about TradFi and all that, but like based on my understanding, I feel like it's like a lot harder for them to fail because unlike like FTX and all these other companies, they have access to capital, don't they? Like if things happens because they are like, I mean, are they like, I guess, closer to the money printer in a way ish? They can access debt and all that. Like, am I getting this right? Or
well, think
is
about it. So if one of the ways that Strategy acquired so much of their Bitcoin in the last, I would say, 9 months, was through what they call the ATM or at the market. So basically, they go to the SEC and say, "Hey, we want to sell additional shares of our stock into the marketplace," which usually is dilutive. It's usually a negative thing. It's usually like, "Oh, this company is desperate," but they're saying, "No, they are going to print money. They're going to print money by basically printing shares, issue those out into the market, take those proceeds, and smash buy Bitcoin." So, are they close to the money printer? No, not so much. They are the money. They have their own money printer. That's the distinction. So these companies that are able to issue shares basically out of nothing, out of their pool of authorized shares, and issue them and sell them into the market, essentially they're kind of printing money, and then they're taking that paper money and putting it into the hardest asset known to man, and let it compound over 60% a year. So you're right. Because of their access to the capital markets as a publicly traded company, that gives them a strong lifeline to continue to grow their business. And as long as on the so if you step back, so you have the equity side I've talked about, and then there's the debt side. So if you add debt, that of course adds some more leverage. It grows generally your multiple to net asset value. So the equity investors will see you kind of levering up with debt and buying Bitcoin. Your multiple and net asset value will grow. Then you can go out to the equity market and say, okay, we're going to sell shares, and the higher that premium is, the more Bitcoin you're able to accrue. And so as long as that debt side doesn't get too high, like I said, Strategies, right? I'm looking at their dashboard. It's 19% right now in terms of a debt and preferred instruments over their net asset Bitcoin net asset value. Then you're fine. But if you let that debt go too crazy, or you do some really really creative things, you start buying other businesses, do like a leverage buyout kind of private equity type model. I mean, that's a lot more risky.
yeah, fair enough, fair enough. Interesting. And I saw that talking about money printing and all that. I saw that recently you read the book, The Big Print. What you think about it? What was your biggest takeaway about that one, actually?
Oh, the big print was fantastic. So I got a chance to meet to meet Larry at in Bitcoin Vegas, and I've heard him. It's funny. I remember him bursting onto the scene. I think I first saw Larry at the Bitcoin Atlantis. Yeah, Madeira. I'm like, who is this guy? He sounds like a gold bug. What's going on here? But I really liked he has a really good perspective on Bitcoin because he has that TradFi experience. He was an investor during the great financial crisis, and so he's kind of seen the impact of fiat money on people and how unfair it can be. He kind of got the shaft during the great financial crisis where he kind of saw the housing market failing, just like Michael Burry and some of the other folks in The Big Short. If you go watch The Big Short or read the book, and so I think he tried to short some stuff, and then SEC like turned off the buy button. They kind of turned off the short button, and that kind of messed him up. So he's kind of seen like, okay, this game is really kind of rigged, right? It's kind of rigged for, to your point about being close to the money printer. It's kind of rigged towards those that have that Cantillon effect, right? That kind of benefit being closest to the money and whatnot. So yeah, I loved his book. I thought I've read a lot of the books that he referenced, whether it's the Bitcoin Standard, Lynn Alden's book, Broken Money, he certainly referenced several times. Her book's phenomenal because it just does a really good job also of covering the history of money and why it's not working for most people. And so I thought, what I love about his book is he just kind of pulled it all together in a way that's really easy to consume and understand. What drew me to it was I was seeing a lot of people say, "Hey, I gave this to my dad, or I gave this to my grandma, or whatever," and they would be turned off by maybe some of the other more technical Bitcoin books or whatever. But this was so easy to read and accessible. They're like, "Oh, I see the problem with the money." Okay, he just makes it. I think the biggest takeaway is that it's a very accessible way to understand. Hey, why is the fiat system not work for most people? Like, why is it that folks just feel like they can't get ahead? I look at young people in my community, in my church, that want to buy a home, and they're just like, oh my gosh, like they're 400, $500,000 just to get started, and it's like, my goodness, when I was first buying a house with my wife, for her first home she bought before I met her, it was probably in the hundreds, right? 20
That's
25 years
wild.
ago, right? And
Yeah,
now
yeah,
it's like you got to go, 3, 4, 500 just to, oh my goodness, that's
yeah.
unbelievable. And so he
Sheesh.
does a really nice job, I think, breaking down central banking, fiat currency constantly debasing, the Cantillon effect. He covers a lot of those things. And the fact that he does a good job too, I think, talking about the problems with our country and our dollar is not a red thing. It's not a blue thing, right? It's not the Republicans or the Democrats. That's not it at all, right? It's, if you look at it, it's how like I like to say, the purpose of a system is what it does. And so if you look at the fiat system, it's doing what it intended, right? If you hold assets, you're doing great. And if you're just doing income, well, you're not doing so great, but you're paying taxes. So that's great. You keep the system going. And so he does a really nice job of just making that super easy to understand, that I think anybody could read, even if they're not, a Bitcoiner per se.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so as far as like the future, how do you see this like playing out exactly? Like, because in my head, I'm thinking, if I live until I'm like 80 or 90 years old, I do not see a world where I'm using the US dollar anymore. And like, do you see like do you see a world where like the government tries to like extend the life of the US dollar for like another 50 years ish, and with like using stable coins and all those things? Or do you see a world where like it's kind of like a faster death, like maybe, I don't want to say the word death necessarily, but like a faster, yeah, yeah, I guess, yeah, we can say that, in like like less than 20 years? What do you envision? Of course we don't know, but what do you see there?
Well, if we didn't pontificate or imagine the possible future, how many podcasts would we have, right? No, I think it's interesting to think about though, and I kind of color myself a futurist, and to be a futurist, you have to look at the past, which is my belief, and then kind of project forward. And so we've had, I mean, every fiat currency fails, right? Every single one, right? But they can extend themselves quite a long time. So a lot of Bitcoiners, as I got in and started listening, I kept hearing this notion of like the stock to FOMO model, right? Which is this idea of Bitcoin's going to kind of ebb up and then kind of do okay, and then like flatten out and then go whoop, kind of like Weimar Germany, right, where the German mark just like exponentially hyperinflated, and lost its value against gold and other currencies. And so there's this notion that it's going to happen in the U.S. at any moment. Is it? I don't think so. I think it's always good to listen to contrarians. I mean, it's good to kind of you have a consensus view. I think Larry Lepard and Lynn Alden, other. I love Lynn Alden's. Nothing stops this train, right? I mean, she gets it. She's that the government can't get out of this deficit spending. We're just locked into it. Like there's no way out, right? And we saw, right, with all the efforts that Bush and Elon Musk. I was kind of excited, but I was still skeptical. You know, trillion, 2 trillion. They thought they could cut out of the government. It's like, well, wait a minute. If like entitlements are like 4 trillion, defense is a trillion, interest expenses a trillion, so you're like five. You
Yeah,
know, you got like 800 billion to cut. Like you're not really
right,
going to get anything done, are you? And no, they didn't.
right.
at
It's like
150.
little putting a little band-aid on like a big like burn
Yeah,
wound. Basically, it's like, yeah,
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 yeah. You're trying to empty a bathtub full of water with like a little medicine cup, right?
yeah, yeah,
And then the spigot's still going. The spigot's
yeah.
still wide open.
Right.
And that's exactly what's happening with the government. Um, so all those things are true. But look at Japan. Look at Japan, right? Japan has been struggling. Really, they peaked out in the 90s in terms of the Nikkei, and then kind of went into a long bear market and lots of deflation, real estate prices going down for years and years. But they kept going. Like the yen just didn't like die. It's still a major currency. Um, and what happened, right? The central bank made it. They made it work. They did what's called yield curve control, and they kind of managed, how yields could function, and this dealt with very very low inflation, or deflation in a lot of areas, and they survived, right? And eventually the Nikkei came back, and after like 30 years or 25 years or something like that. So the fact of the matter is, these fiat economies can go for a very long time, right? I mean, even think about it in England, right? The last global reserve currency, right now it's the dollar is the global reserve currency. The last one was the pound in Britain. But the pound's still around. Like UK didn't close up. They didn't hyperinflate. They're still around. So I think people underestimate how quickly that failure will happen. But I really like watching macro, so macro trends and what's happening in the treasury market. James Lavish is a really good resource that I would recommend people kind of follow on X. He does a good job kind of tracking the treasury market, and people just aren't buying like sovereigns aren't really buying the U.S. Treasuries like they used to. Right in the past, I remember when I was a young man hearing the concerns of, oh, China owns $1 trillion of our debt, and they're the biggest holder of the U.S. debt. And it's like that's not the case anymore, right? I think last time I heard, I think it was Japan. China's been a net seller of our debt. They're stocking up on gold, which is very interesting. In fact, a lot of central banks around the world are stocking up on gold. That's very interesting. And you're not seeing the U.S. issue 10 and 20-year debt. I mean, some sure, but for the most part, it's really short-term paper. We're just basically issuing, T bills, 3 month, 6 month, type of bills, type of debt to fund the government. And as a result, we've got 36, almost 37 trillion of debt. You've got like 7 trillion of that rolling this year that need to be rolled over. And probably into just short-term paper again, probably 6 month, maybe 1 year top paper. Nobody wants 10 years and 20 years and 30 years. Why would you? Like, why would you accept, like, what's the current rate? Like, it's, I got trading view up here. What if you have the 10-year rate at 4.3%? Like, well, do you think interest rates are going to be higher than 4.3% in 10 years? Yeah, with all the inflation and deficit. Yeah. Okay, well then why do I lock in and buy an instrument today paying 4.3% when maybe in a few years it'll be like 6, 8%. And now I'm upside down, right? Because when the rates go up, the price goes down, so the value of my bond goes down.
Yeah.
So I'm
And the
watching
Fed,
that very closely.
right? And the Fed also, I believe, bought like two times now. I think they bought. I can't remember the math really. I think they bought their bonds back again. I don't really know the full story behind that part. I don't know if you know more about this one too.
Yeah, so the Treasury is buying what they call off the run bonds. They're kind of bonds that aren't highly liquid, so they don't trade very easily on the market. So the Treasury will buy some of those back, and I forget how much they bought back, but they've done that a couple of times. So that's interesting. Kind of waiting for the Federal Reserve to start doing end what they call QT, which is basically they're letting assets roll off the balance sheet. So they're not actively like selling things. They don't want to like crush the market or things like that. But as they have T-bills, treasuries, mortgage-backed securities that are basically maturing, they're just letting those kind of roll off the books. They're not replacing them. So the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve is shrinking. So I say all of that just because they have probably added some capacity now, right? So if we really need to go back to QE, which the government will eventually have to do, the Federal Reserve can absolutely be a buyer of those treasuries. I mean, that's essentially what's been happening in Japan for ages and ages. So all that said, like, they can prolong the game, I think, for quite a while. And you mentioned stable coins. That's something else to watch very carefully. So Scott Bessent was just talking the other day, the Treasury Secretary. I believe it was yesterday. The Genius Act was passed by the Senate. And I think the House has to revote on it or something like that before it can go to Trump's desk for signature. But the Genius Act is all about creating a framework for stablecoins in the United States. Well, who's interested in that? Oh, well, Tether was like the seventh largest buyer of treasuries last year. Tether, the stablecoin issuer of USDT. So the government finally woke up and said, "Oh, wait a minute, we need someone that's interested in buying treasuries. Stablecoin issuers like to buy lots of treasuries. Let's put a framework in place where we can have a whole new set of demand for trillions of dollars of treasuries." So watch those kinds of things very carefully. Again, all of that, it can really extend this game a long time, but it doesn't matter. As liquidity is coming into the market, Bitcoin's going to sniff it out, gold's sniffing it out, and they'll continue to move higher as more liquidity keeps entering the system. So they're going up forever, right? And but the dollar can continue to persist, I think, alongside for quite a while, longer than some Bitcoiners anticipate.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. That's that. Wow, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, and then yeah, like you said, like Lynn said, at the end of the day, nothing stopped this train. It's just the way it is. Unfortunately, I feel like there's so many people in front of the train, and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, y'all gotta get out. Like yeah, are you a Marvel fan by any chance? Do you watch
Oh,
any
not
Marvel movies?
really.
Oh,
I should
okay,
be.
no,
I should
never
be
mind.
less of a macro
Oh yeah,
Bitcoin treasury nerd. That's mostly where
oh
I spend
yeah.
my time. But
Oh no, no worries. I was gonna refer to this Spider-Man 2 movie where he was trying to like get people out of the way of the train, and he was trying to like
mm,
stop the train himself. But that's what I feel like, that's what the Fed's trying to do. But yeah, it's like yeah,
nobody
it's
can stop
impossible.
it.
No.
Nobody can stop it. And if anybody, and whether regardless of people's views on Trump or whatever, but the messaging was certainly around cutting the size of government. We're going to finally get after the deficits. We're going to finally tackle inflation. And I kept listening, and I was thinking, this language around inflation that they keep talking about, blaming the Biden administration, and I'm sitting here going, no one's talking about the Fed. That's very interesting. No one's talking about a currency that loses programmed to lose 2% a year in value and really uses 7% a year in value that it loses. So we're not talking about any of those things. But anyway, the most aggressive administration in terms of we're going to right size government, cut all these costs, and fix the deficit. And what do you hear them saying now? Oh, we're going to run the economy hot. We're going to run the economy hot. After World War II, right? We had debt to GDP around what it is today, 120% debt to GDP, because of all the deficits from World War II, and we ran the economy hot, basically, right? Really high GDP, nominal GDP, and we're able to kind of take care of the debt as a result, right? Because we grew the economy. So now that's the language. Instead of we're going to pay down the deficit, we're going to tighten our belts, we're going to no. Now we're talking about running the economy hot, getting stable coins, driving demand for treasuries. Nothing stops this train. They've moved from like trying to like pull on the brake to now, okay, let's put
Just
coal into the motor.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. That reminds me. I saw a funny picture on X where it's like there's like a big elephant in like a little room, and then the media is all turning around, facing the other way, where they're just blaming everything else for inflation. It's like y'all really just don't see this thing right here in the corner, this big elephant. That's basically how I see it. I don't know. Nobody's talking about the real cause of it. Just let's just blame this person. Let's just blame that person. Yeah, it is. Yeah, wow,
It's
crazy.
what really opened my eyes when I was early in my Bitcoin journey, and I started thinking about, wait a minute. Okay, I thought so. Another really good book I read was "Bitcoin is Venice." Not a super easy read, but
Mhm. Wait, what is that one?
Bitcoin is Venice.
Okay, I have to. I'll look
Might
at
have it
that.
somewhere. Don't know where it is off the top of my head. Oh, there it is, right behind me.
Mhm.
Um, but one of the chapters was something like, "This is not capitalism," and that's true. Like, wait a minute. I was kind of raised that this is a capitalist country where free enterprise, reigns supreme. You're able to anybody can start a business. It's level playing field. All these things. But I'm like, why do we have an entity at the center of our economy that makes centralized decisions about the price of money, the interest rates, liquidity, all of those kinds of things? Why do we have that in a so-called capitalist? Isn't that more of like a central? When I think of central planning, I think more like socialism and communism more like a managed economies like China, etc. So why do we have that? And so that's why I read the Creature from Jekyll Island, which is I would certainly encourage all your viewers to check it out. But that's a very peculiar thing, and that's why Bitcoin comes out. It's like, well, you don't need a central bank. You don't need anybody to set the price of money. Everything's truly free market. If you look at the mining, the price for block space on the Bitcoin protocol, all totally free market, right? Or I think right now I mean, it's probably pennies to get into to get into the to get into a block right now is 44 cents to get low priority, but during the ordinals craze when NFTs on Bitcoin was a thing for a hot minute, maybe it was 40, 50, $60 to get into a block, to get a transaction through. Free market reigns. Anybody else to tell us what it is. So
I was gonna say the other thing you mentioned, the Creature from Jekyll Island, and
mm.
I automatically went to my head. I was thinking about. Have you read the book, The Confession of a Economic Hitman, by any chance?
Ah, it's in
I
my
feel like those two.
upstairs bookshelf.
Oh
I haven't
yeah,
read it yet. Is it
I feel
good?
like those two kind of match. Like they go. I feel like they go hand in hand because they are not. They were not easy reads for me, but
Mm,
like I feel like they kind of, it's kind of, once you understand one part of it and then you read the other one, it's kind of like, oh, this is like a mastermind type of, like, I don't
mm,
want to say the word mafia, but it's kind of like, Jesus, y'all really just somebody really was just thinking about how can I just control the whole, I
mm.
mean, almost everything really. So yeah, I don't know, it's
It's
wild.
yeah, it's so interesting because so I do want to read that. I have that book. It's in my bookshelf upstairs. I have a long list of books to read. But sometimes I think about, like, as you start to open your eyes, right? If you've seen The Matrix, you get Neo gets unplugged. That's why we say orange pilled, right? When you get into Bitcoin, you're orange pilled. It's the Matrix idea of being red pilled and getting unplugged from the Matrix and seeing life as it really is, and you start to question everything, and you start to wonder, like, okay, is there like a cabal like planning all this stuff? And at first I was kind of like worried that was the case, and that could still be. My view is we have this monetary system. Whoever, if you read The Creature from Jekyll Island, there are certainly some plans there from the money trust, as they called it, to create a cartel around our money, and take that issuing of the money out of the hands of the government and putting into this kind of quasi government, really private entity, owned by the banks. And so there was certainly some conspiracy there, but today I think it's all broken incentives. We have the system we now have. All the people that created that system are long dead, and so now we just have this money that drives all these perverse incentives of, oh, as soon as I get the money, it's going to lose value. I have to get rid of it as quickly as possible. Oh, I can use debt to lever up my business and become very rich, and buy assets with that debt, right? So that's why you see. I always wondered, like, I see rich people. Why is this person buying a fourth home for $10 million? I'm like, they can't live in all these homes. I was just scratching my head, like, what is going on here? And then I realized that now, of course, that's like store of value. They're putting their money somewhere because the money's a melting ice cube. What does real estate happen to grow per year? Oh, magically around 7%. Very interesting. Okay, so there's a monetary premium on our real estate. Um, so yeah, all of those things start to show up. But I think I don't know about the cabal today, but I would say there's definitely just broken incentives from a money that does what it does, and we have it set up where, yep, if you have assets, you do very well. You can do way better than that 7%, right? You can, the speculative attack, as Pierre Rochard would say, right, of borrow in a weak currency and buy a strong asset with it, kind of a carry trade, if you will. Um, so they do very well. But boy, yeah, you're teacher, nurse. I mean, luckily you know about Bitcoin, so of course you're able to protect yourself with Bitcoin and some investments to grow your capital and things like that. But yeah, most working folks, don't know about those things. We don't teach that in school. There's the meme of, hey, how do I balance a checkbook? And they're like, let's sing hot cross buns, right? It's kind of like, what? Like, here's some trigonometry, and like, what are stocks? And it's like, so we're not teaching these things. So then you get out, and then we send you to college. So I won't rant forever. Then we send you to, okay, now you need to go to university as soon as you get out of high school. Go sign up for $150,000 of debt. No idea what you're signing. basically getting a ninja loan, like we would have said back in the 2008 days, right? No income, no job, sign up for what would have been a house worth 20, 25 years ago of debt. And then you get out, with your underwater basket weaving degree, and it's like, okay, here's your job at Starbucks, right? For, $15 an hour. And it's like, huh?
Jeez, yep.
So
I know
we
you're
just
just starting from like behind. Yep.
starting way, way
Yeah,
behind.
yeah.
So
Whew.
it's just all broken incentives all the way around, and people are
Yeah,
benefiting all along the way. So I don't believe it's a cabal, but there's
yeah.
definitely a lot of broken incentives that broken money drives.
Yeah, that's fair. Wow. Yeah, I know. Man, yeah, no. I could go on about this college thing for a long time because I got into a lot of student loan debts too, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I knew about all this thing like before I went in. Like I would have. I think about it all the time. Like, man, my future kids are gonna be lucky because they'll at least they'll be able to learn from me. But man, that hurts. That hurts.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as like your family and all that, are they all orange pill? I mean, you are very knowledgeable and all that. Are they like kind of following your footsteps now, or
Yeah,
no?
I mean, I think so. My immediate family, they all get Bitcoin. They know it. They understand it. They have it. Sometimes my son will buy it. Well, hey, can you buy some Bitcoin? He was smart. He would. He's a teenager now, but yeah, when it was like in the 40s, he'd be like, hey, can I buy some Bitcoin? I have a little bit of birthday money or something like that, or some chore
Nice.
money. And he was stacking. He was stacking
Yeah.
hard. Last year, and I had to replace his device. We were moving his wallet around, and I was like, wow, you did pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And sometimes he's like, oh, I think I'll
Smart
sell some to buy
kid.
some Legos. And I'm like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 don't do that. So he's not all the way there, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's
he's
starting to
close.
get it. He's definitely doing better than like most of the kids his age for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then some other members of my family, have also embraced it and bought some as well. I mean, I don't know that anybody's, maybe to my level of fanaticism, where basically, my whole net worth is exposed to either Bitcoin or Bitcoin equities. But yeah, no, I have been able to orange pill a few folks, and working on my chiropractor, working on him a little bit, right, getting him interested. And he's
Yeah.
asking more questions, so that's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's still working on my rancher, right? we buy
Yep.
we buy our beef
Yeah.
from a local rancher, so I'm kind of working on
Yeah.
her to get.
Yeah.
I always ask, like, hey, do you want to accept Bitcoin for this?
Yeah.
Not there
Oh
yet.
yeah.
We'll keep
Yep,
working
yep,
on it.
yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. And also talking about beef actually. Oh, you on the carnivore diet or is it like more of a keto, low, I guess like keto diet ish? Like what and I know because a lot of Bitcoiners are doing the eating a lot more steak. That's just the thing to do now, I guess. But like, can you
Yeah.
can you like explain like why people are doing that? Well, I guess Bitcoiners are doing that more now, actually.
I mean, so when you get into Bitcoin, you get this like lower time preference, right? Before Bitcoin, you have this high time preference of like, I can only think about today, right? I can't think about the future. And once you have Bitcoin, you can think about the future. And so one of the things you start to want to do is take your health more seriously. And I'd already started lifting, doing kettlebells, and so doing some fitness training finally. During that was more during the pandemic of just being sick and tired of being sick and tired, but I eventually started hearing more and more people talk about being carnivore, and I'm like, what does that mean? Like, aren't we all carnivore? Like, I didn't know what that meant. And even Saifedean Ammous, right, the author of Bitcoin Standard, talked about that. And so I read Fiat Food, which I think is behind me, which was originally, I think, a chapter in the Fiat Standard, which I haven't read the Fiat Standard yet, but I heard the author of Fiat Food, and so like, okay, I read that, and I realized how just like our money is broken, and the broken money breaks other things. It broke food, right? So I mean, imagine if beef were still like steak, if steak were still in the CPI index, right? And everybody saw inflation was like 30%, a year. In that case, there would be revolts, right? Like one of the surest ways to lose control of a country is to have the price of food get out of control. So swap out those higher quality foods with lower quality foods, and then say, oh yeah, the price is only 2% a year, 3% a year inflation, no problem. But what's in that basket of food? Well, it's cornflakes, it's bread. Like, look at the old food pyramid, right? What was like 6 to 11 servings of grains should be your foundation. That's awful. Like, that's a great way. And then of course, the seed oils, your canola oil, corn oil, all those things, just adds a lot, packs on a lot of pounds, a lot of sugar into your body. Um, and so I started learning more and more about this. It's like, okay, well, what's good to eat then? And it's like beef has all these nutrients. It's so good for you. It's so healthy. And yeah, there's a debate, grass fed, corn fed, whatever. Just get good beef, like, it's just good beef. And so I'm not a full carnivore. Like, true carnivore is really beef, salt, water. That's basically all you eat, all you drink, right? I'm more Paul Saladino, I think, was the first guy that I kind of saw have a diet that I was like, oh, okay, I think that's actually sustainable. So he does what's called animal based, and that's really what I adopted. So heavily meat's definitely the main thing, beef's definitely the main thing, occasional fish, but not very often. Beef, and then fruit, honey, kefir. It's like a kind of a fermented, right, dairy product. That's really good for you, good for your gut microbiome. And if I do bread, it's got to be like homemade sourdough, because you
Yeah.
go look at the bread in your grocery store, look at the ingredient list, and
Yeah.
go, is that
It's a
bread
it's a
or
paragraph.
it's a paragraph? And my kids are all, and I make burgers a lot for lunch. I'll
Yeah.
just make a couple of burger patties and maybe some fried eggs. And my kids are like, I'll be like, does anybody want any burgers? And the kids will be like, do you have any buns? I'm like, no, I don't, because they have like 15. Or if I do find like the one at the co-op that's got like 4 or 5 ingredients, I don't like that one, So it's like, but that's what it was. It was just like, I want to be healthy and live long in a healthy way, and lower my time preference. And so, yeah, that's eating well is key. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I'm in the same boat too. I'm like, now my health. I've been taking. I take my health way more seriously now for sure. Because I mean, I was always an athlete growing up, but like I
oh,
never really like ate as good as I thought. Really, like I used to go to McDonald's all the time. I used to
yeah,
just. I never cared, and now I'm like, oh, I should probably stop doing that. So yeah, that's I guess that's another thing that Bitcoin really does to you. It just kind of makes you aware of like your environment, how other things are affecting your life,
yeah.
especially our food for sure. So yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I mean, Bitcoin
And
encourages truth, right? It
yep.
encourages truth in all things.
Hmm.
And so nutrition is no different. Like, once you start to question the reality of your money and
Yeah.
realize there's a lot of mistruth there, in terms of like, the plan of like, yeah, go to school, get education, get in debt with your house, and then slave away and dual income, have a dual income family, and have someone else raise your kids and do that whole thing. And you
Hmm.
start to like, well, that's not like the true way to live. And then you go look at the food and you're like, oh, wait a minute, like, what's in what are all these ingredients? I can't pronounce them, but they're all cheap. I can afford them. And now I walk into a grocery store and I'm like, there's about 2% of stuff in this place that are food, and
Yep.
everything else is a science experiment.
Yep. Yep. No, yep. Yep. Same here. That's literally like I literally trying to like I walk in there and I trying to avoid almost anything in a box if I can. Like I
Yep.
just if I'm just going straight for the fruits, the vegetables, the meat, and like maybe a few other things. But like I'm like, yeah, I gotta yeah, I'm a step away. Yeah, my diet is like totally different right now. It's
Yeah.
crazy, but it's hard to do it because of course, when you go out with friends and all that, you can't really you can't. It's like hard to be 100% healthy and eat healthy. I guess so. Isn't it?
Yeah.
But small steps. I guess that
Small
counts.
steps. And
Yeah,
we do a lot of road trips. Like, we'll go on a road trip here in a few days.
nice.
And
Yeah,
so yeah, the kids want McDonald's sometimes, and I'm like, okay,
right.
I got that. I figured out the hack from my carnivore people on X. Give me the burger patties, some cheese, some
Yeah,
bacon, and it
nice.
works.
Nice, nice, nice. That's good. That's good. That's good. And I don't want to take too much of your time, so I have one last question for you that I ask everybody else. If you could go back in the past and give yourself advice other than buying more Bitcoin, what would you tell yourself?
Oh man. It's probably the same advice that I received. I had a chance to work with a fairly wealthy family early in my career, and the patriarch had told me then, like, be a reader, be a reader. And I don't think I took him seriously enough. And when I became a Bitcoiner and lowered my time preference, wanted to grow as a person more, I became a reader again, and obviously started reading a lot of these books. So I think I would say, to be more of a reader earlier, and really try to understand the history of like human nature and understand money. So you said I can't, go back and buy Bitcoin, but make myself more, make it so that I understand. Like I was just reading in the Bible this morning about Jesus telling the Pharisees and Sadducees, you don't understand the signs of the times, right? Of what's happening. And so I wish I had spent more time so that I could understand the sign of the times. Like when the great financial crisis, happened, I was, 10 years into my career. Well, why didn't I see what was really happening? Why wasn't I curious? I know I heard about Bitcoin at some point, in the early, 2000, 2010s or whatever, maybe mid 2010s. I know I'd heard the word a couple of times. Nobody actually approached me about it, but I'd heard about it. So I remembered enough to like have a thought in my head of like, what is that? I don't really care. And then like in 2017, I did a fair. I was working at an engineering company, and we were kind of pulling people from all across the company that were doing innovative technology things. And one of the people I was working with was, oh yeah, we should do a blockchain exhibit. And I'm like, what's that? No curiosity, didn't look into it. So I think if I had read more and understood more of the history of money and human nature, then I think it would have been more primed for Bitcoin and better to understand the signs of the times when I saw the GFC happen, because that was a real big paradigm shift. And I know we don't have time to go into it, but that kind of kicked off, I think, our fourth turning that we're
Yeah.
currently in. So,
No, that's fair. That's fair.
so yeah,
Yeah, it yeah. No, that's fair. It's the same thing with me too. I was never really a big reader until Bitcoin, really, and then now I'm all into. I mean, I would prefer audiobooks, really. So that's why I'm like, I download Audible, and I've been
mm,
just cramming these books, just reading every single thing that I could find. So no, 100%, I agree. That's great advice. And I just wanted to ask real quick. Of course, I say the last question, but I wanted to ask about religion. I know that's a sensitive topic for most people, but my family is religious, and a lot of people listening to this podcast are religious as well. And on your X, it does say, what's it? I think Jesus, Bitcoin, liberty. Do
mhm.
you see a relation between Bitcoin and religion, or is that not? Meh. I know, like, money in the Bible does have a lot of like
Hmm.
talk about money in it for sure, like a lot more than people think. Do you see any correlation between those two at all? I know that
Absolutely.
one can be a short answer because I know we I don't want to take too much of
Yeah,
your time,
no,
but
but I think briefly, I would absolutely. When I first
Mhm.
started to become a Bitcoiner, so I'm absolutely a Jesus follower, and not a perfect one, of course, as none of us are, um, but as I started learning about Bitcoin, reading lots of books, and then I'm in church, I'm hearing different concepts, and I'm like, ah, man, Bitcoin really feels aligned to kind of truth, right? There's a really good movie that came out a year ago. Yeah, I think it came out last year actually at Bitcoin Nashville, called "God Bless Bitcoin." It has different religious leaders, right? Christians, Jews, Islamic folks as well, that are all talking about truth and the how Bitcoin how fiat money is kind of this corrupting element, right? It's not true. It's dishonest weights and measures. The whole concept. Um, and like I said, Bitcoin is like, no, let's have truth. Like, this is what the money really is. This is what it does. It's all visible. All the code's open source. I've got mempool.space. I'm looking at the network right now, right? Everything's visible to me. Whereas the dollar, I have to wait for, yesterday we had the FOMC, right? The Federal Open Markets Committee to tell us what the price of money was going to be. And it's just, that's kind of nonsense. So yeah, I really see it as like honest weights and measures, honest, real truth is what I think Bitcoin represents, and I believe that God is truth. Like, there, you can't. People talk about my truth or your truth, like, was the truth. there's kind of a universal truth, right? And those laws are inviolable, whether it's um, gravity, right? Gravity. You're not. Good luck trying to say like, well, my truth is that gravity doesn't exist. Well, okay, jump off that hill and see what happens, right? You're gonna land. You're not gonna go up. And people's energy that they put, and it needs to be stored someplace, and they need to store it in something that actually has integrity. And Bitcoin has integrity, and my faith is all about integrity, right? Do what you say you're going to do. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, as Jesus says. So that's I think they are very, very compatible. And you're right. I would encourage your viewers, like, go open up a Bible app, or whatever your religious text is, and but certainly I can speak to the Bible. I can't speak to others, I should say. Go search for money, gold, silver, precious jewels, I actually did a study last year when I was kind of getting into Bitcoin, and I did like a study for a month or two, and I was shocked how much money comes up in the Bible. It's almost Jesus almost talks about money or uses it in parables almost more than almost any other topic. Um, so it must be important. It must be, and of course, he'll say, he was careful to say, you cannot serve both God and money. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So there's a lot of cautions certainly about money. But I think the sense is don't mess with the money. Don't make the money hurt people. I mean, Jesus was very critical of those who would take advantage of widows and kind of extract money from them, after their husband died or what have you. He was very critical of
Yep.
people who did that. Um, and so
Yeah.
yeah, if you're involved in that line of work today in the fiat system, you should repent.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I know. Yeah, like they say, it's money can be a great servant, but a terrible master. Yeah, it's yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
That's fair. That's fair. But man, thank you for your time, man. I appreciate you. Where can people find you if they need to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me on X. Search for Mr. Lee or at Lee Winbush, LeeWinbush. You can track me out, come say hi, and yeah, we'll chat on
Nice,
X.
nice, nice. All right, man. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it once again. Thank you.
Thanks.